Wrestling, like any craft, isn't something you can just become good at on day one. No, even legends like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart had to go through a process of learning before they became great. And that's why we should always give talent the space they need to grow and develop. Of course, there are plenty of people on the WWE roster who have improved significantly over the last couple of years, but who are the most notable of them all? Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at right now, starting with Tiffany Stratton. Yes, Tiffany Stratton has come quite a long way already for someone who only got their start inside the squared circle in 2021, because as it stands today, just 3 years into her career, she's one of the key parts of SmackDown's women's roster. But it's not like she hasn't earned her spot there, as the Minnesota native has certainly put the work in to go from rookie to established performer in near record time. Need any evidence of just how far she's come? Just go back and watch her early matches against the likes of Amari Miller and Fallon Henley, because while she was never exactly bad in any of these, it's clear to see that she was a beginner and needed a lot of work if she was ever going to be a top-level star. Thankfully, though, that work would be put in on her part, and so here we stand today in a situation where Tiffy is a one-time NXT Women's Champion and the current Miss Money in the Bank. And with it seeming inevitable she's going to be cashing in her contract on her new bestie any day now, someone we'll get to in a moment, we fully expect her to be a world champion on the main roster too before the year is out. Could anyone have foreseen this back during her first days on 2.0? Sure, you might have been able to because, as we said a moment ago, Tiffany was never bad and always had the raw talent required to make it. It was really just a case of her having enough time to put it all together, something she's well en route to doing now. But what of that best friend we alluded to earlier? How does she fit into today's video? Well, great, as it happens, because she's our next subject, Nia Jax. Yes, we're not going to say Nia Jax is the next Charlotte Flair or anything, but considering the level she was at during her first run in WWE between 2014 and 2021 and the level she's at today, she has to be considered someone who's made huge improvements. After all, that first run saw her gain a reputation by many for being a dangerous wrestler who had a long history of legitimately injuring her opponents. So it was clear that when she was released at the beginning of the 2020s, some changes were going to need to be made before she returned home to WWE. Luckily then, it appears she's done just this, because while she's putting on some solid matches on SmackDown, Nia is also a lot safer in the ring, with this meaning WWE have felt comfortable putting her in a far more prominent role as the big bully heel of the Blue brand. And this role has been so successful for her, it's seen her go as far as to defeat Bayley for the WWE Women's Championship at August 3rd, 2024's SummerSlam. But then, it's not just the women's title which has been awarded to her during this go-around in WWE. No, she's also become a one-time Queen of the Ring too, and in doing so, she's finally been able to silence her doubters who believed that she'd never have what it took to reach the top. Where will she go from here? Who knows? Maybe after the women's World Heavyweight title too at some point. We honestly wouldn't be surprised, as there is still a lot of potential in her shifting over to Raw and having a big-time rematch with Rhea Ripley at some point. Until then, though, she'll just have to keep plugging away on SmackDown, doing her thing and getting better with each passing day. But let's move away from the ladies of Friday nights for a moment and onto the men instead, as it's there we find our next subject, Solo Sikoa. Yes, it's true that many fans still aren't fully sold on Solo Sikoa as a top-level guy, someone on the same tier as a Roman Reigns or a Cody Rhodes. However, don't let that suggest he hasn't taken massive steps forward over the last few years. After all, this is a man who only started wrestling in 2018, so to see him main event pay-per-views and world title matches already, well, that's quite an achievement. That's right, pretty much as soon as he debuted on the main roster back in 2022 as the silent enforcer for Roman Reigns, he was showing that he had something special about him. And this became more and more evident as time went on, and his presentation as the real one to fear in the heel group was further established. Of course, it should come as no surprise to learn then that when Roman took a sabbatical following his loss to Cody at WrestleMania 40, it was his cousin who stepped up to the plate and took over leadership of the Bloodline, with him at this point assembling an all-new army around him. How has this worked out for the Sacramento native? Pretty great, as he's now one of the more prominent heels in all of WWE, and someone who seemingly has a big singles match set up against the Tribal Chief at some point in the near future, possibly even at WrestleMania 41. The only question left then is, will Solo win this inevitable feud and move up to an even higher level entirely? We guess we'll just have to wait and see, but in the meantime, we've no doubt he'll continue to be hard at work behind the scenes in improving his game, all in preparation for the moment his opportunity arises. That said, for as much as Solo Sikoa has stepped up his game recently, there are some who believe that he isn't in fact the future of the bloodline, and that this moniker should instead go to someone else, someone who's our next subject, Jacob Fatu. That's right, while Solo may be the official leader of Bloodline 2.0, and while Roman Reigns might be calling himself the original tribal chief, many fans feel that the real one to watch out for in that whole storyline is Jacob Fatu. And that's because in the Samoan Werewolf, we have one of the best young performers out there. But then this has been evident for a while now, as while working for MLW between 2019 and 2024, Jacob was absolutely killing it on a regular basis. So much so that he'd there become a one-time national openweight champion and a one-time world heavyweight champion. That said, there's certainly a case to be made that, for as great as he was in Major League Wrestling, the son of the Tonga Kid has reached another level altogether since signing on the dotted line with WWE earlier this year. And that's because now on SmackDown every week, Jacob has taken everything he's learned over the years and put it out there for a much larger audience, an audience who can now finally be introduced to his greatness. So great has he been, in fact, and so much has he already impressed fans, there's already a push for him to be the man to serve as the final hurdle for Roman Reigns to overcome during this whole Bloodline Civil War storyline, not Solo Sikoa. And with him transforming his physique since his WWE debut by losing over 50 pounds, he's been able to really show off his high-flying skills, as well as maintaining the aura he creates every time he walks through the curtain. In fact, if he keeps on progressing at this rate he's at now, we could easily see a future where Jacob Fatu is standing tall as a pillar of WWE's next generation, alongside the likes of Braun Breaker, Rhea Ripley, and Trick Williams. That said, if the Samoan Werewolf does ever want to reach this level, at some point he's going to have to step up and accept a challenge from a cousin of his, someone who once called himself a member of the Bloodline, Main Event Jey Uso. Seriously, what a wild ride it's been for Jey Uso over the past few years, because while he was always great as a tag team act alongside his twin brother Jimmy, good enough to become a 10-time tag team champion in fact, few, if any, saw much potential in him ever having a singles run. But anyone who's ever doubted Jay's ability to improve in this respect and become a solo star in his own right has been proven wrong now, because as it stands today, as of the time of this video's recording, he's the current Intercontinental Champion. Yes, after 14 years in the WWE, Jay has finally won singles gold. And based on the reactions he's been getting on Raw as of late, fans couldn't be happier for him. But then, why shouldn't they be? Because ever since he first started dipping his toes in the water of the singles divisions back in 2020 when his brother was injured, he's been progressing way more than anyone could have foreseen. Sure, there might have been a few moments where it felt like the solo experiment was ending and Jay was instead being segued back to tag team action, but these moments never seemed to last for long, as Triple H evidently saw the potential in the NYE family member being by himself for the long haul. Thank God he did see this then, because today Jey Uso is one of the most over stars on Raw. Hell, he's one of the most over stars in all of wrestling for that matter. All he has to do at this point is grab a microphone, shout out "Yeet," and fans are with him every step of the way. Will he eventually reach a world title level? Maybe. We certainly can't say it would be a huge shock if Jay ends up becoming the one to dethrone Gunther for the World Heavyweight title. But what about the other world title division on Raw? How does that tie into today's video? Well, it ties in because the current women's world champion is our next subject, Liv Morgan. Now, Liv Morgan is someone who really has pushed herself to that next step on the ladder as of late, something which is clear in the fact that she is the current top dog in the Raw women's division. And it's not like she had an easy time getting to that point either. No, in order to become the champ, the New Jersey native had to beat Becky Lynch herself. Could anyone have foreseen that she'd become such an important part of Monday nights a few years ago? Maybe. But then maybe not, as well she had the potential back then, it didn't look like she was always going to be a main event force. Rather, it looked like Liv was going to fill the role of being a reliable mid-card act who could occasionally be slotted into a top role and then slotted back out of it again once she'd served her purpose. And when she wasn't doing this, she could mill around in the tag team division for a while. That's certainly what she did during a lot of her time alongside Ruby Riott and Sarah Logan in the late 2010s, and it's what she continued to do afterwards, where she was teaming with either Rhea Ripley or Raquel Rodriguez. But then something happened which changed her trajectory, an injury she picked up which was attributed to Mommy in storyline. This proved to be a massive turning point for Morgan, because when she returned from the injury, she set about going on her revenge tour, a revenge tour which saw her turn heel, win the Women's World Heavyweight title, and, perhaps most importantly, steal Dominic Mysterio away from Rhea Ripley. That's right, in the ultimate screw you to her chief rival, Liv went and stole Mommy's man. And not just her man either, no, most of her crew as well, because right now the new and some would say improved version of the Judgment Day includes her, Dirty Dom, Finn Balor, JD McDonough, and Carlito. How long will Liv be able to stay one step ahead of Rhea? That remains to be seen. But one thing is for sure, even if she does eventually get caught up to and loses her world title, the woman from Morristown will remain somewhere near the top of the card on Raw, as by this point, she's leveled herself up to the point that it would be a waste of her talents to have her anywhere else on the card. So it's with this in mind that we ask our next question then. When will our next subject reach the same level as her? Someone who's also been coming on leaps and bounds recently, someone who goes by the name of Jade Cargill. Yes, Jade Cargill is quite an interesting case because in her, we have an example of someone who has pretty much had their entire in-ring career play out on TV. After all, her debut match happened on an episode of Dynamite in 2020 when she teamed with Shaquille O'Neal to take on Cody Rhodes and Red Velvet. And with AEW not really being a house show company, for the next few years, most everything she did would take place on either Wednesday or Friday night television. Needless to say then, her work in AEW was the work of someone who was very much learning on the job, with the pressure to succeed which she was being placed under only added to by the fact that she became the inaugural TBS champion in January of 2022. Would Jade ever truly reach top star level in Jacksonville? Not quite. But since moving to WWE in 2023, we've seen her continue to slowly build up her game to the point that, as it stands now, we can easily see her reach a main event spot before too much longer has passed. She's certainly got the right people helping her learn, as with Bianca Belair as a tag team partner, there's no reason the former college basketball player shouldn't eventually become world champion material. In fact, she might even become a bigger star than Bianca in the years to come. And this is evidenced in the fact that she's already a two-time women's tag team champion in WWE, and an increasing focus on TV every week, with this already putting her well ahead of our next subject, someone who might not be at the top level yet, but who's been quietly rising up the ranks herself in recent months, Maxine Dupri. Yes, many of you may remember a few months back when a fan heckled Maxine Dupri at a live event. And this got a conversation started about how new she was to wrestling, with many fans not pleased with her performances, all while others were happy to watch her develop. And thankfully for Maxine, it looks like she's been able to grow as a wrestler since then, because she's come on leaps and bounds. No, she's not a world beater in the ring quite yet, and she's not going to be winning any Wrestler of the Year awards for 2024, but considering this is someone who literally had her first wrestling match in 2023, and who had to deal with the added stress of that match taking place in front of a worldwide audience watching Raw, we'd say she's doing pretty well in the spot she's in now. After all, she's regularly featured on Monday nights alongside her stablemates Otis and Akira Tozawa, and with every in-ring encounter she does have, she's showing improvements. So it's not unreasonable to think that over the next couple of years then, she could progress to the point that she becomes a real prospect. Yes, we could be talking about Maxine Dupri winning world titles in the future. And considering where she started, that's something she should be proud of. Who knows, we might even see her reunite with her on-screen brother L.A. Knight at some point too. That is, if they're still kayfabe siblings, we're not sure anymore. One thing we are sure of, though, is that it seems Maxine is here to stay for the long haul, and that the rest of the women's division is eventually going to be put on notice by her. But let's move away from a rookie for now and on to someone who's far more experienced in the ring. Yeah, that's right, you don't need to be a newcomer to show improvements. No, sometimes someone who's been doing this for almost 2 decades can have a career boost. And if you need any evidence of this being true, you only have to look at our next subject, Ethan Page. Now, we're not going to say that Ethan Page has only recently improved in the ring because he's been good at that part of his job since the mid-2000s. And it's not like he's suddenly come on leaps and bounds on the mic either, as that's always been a strength of his. What's changed for him, though, has been the opportunities he's been given. As now a part of the NXT roster, he's found himself in the position of being a top guy for the first time ever. Yes, this is more a case of someone improving his overall aura and the way he carries himself as a star. And All Ego certainly deserves this new main event role. Anyone who watched his work in TNA between 2017 and 2021 will be aware of that. And anyone who followed him from there over to AEW during the latter year will also know just how good he is. Sadly for the Canadian, though, while he was able to stand out somewhat in the Impact Zone, once in AEW, he was never quite able to make it to the main event scene for one reason or another. What could Paige do to overcome this? Well, in the end, he decided to move over to NXT. And that turned out to be a great move for him, as immediately upon debuting, he'd be put into a world title program with Trick Williams, with him from there going on to beat Trick Willie for the title during a 4-way match at July 7th's Heatwave. Sure, he may have recently dropped the belt back to Williams at NXT's inaugural CW Network show, but that doesn't mean he's now going to suddenly drop back down into the mid-card. No, we expect Ethan Page to remain in a prominent role on the developmental brand going forward, possibly as an old veteran gatekeeper, similar to what Tommaso Ciampa was doing during his latter days there. And after that, we could even see a main event roster run for the Ontario native, with it being entirely possible he ends up getting involved in some kind of angle with his old co-worker, Cody Rhodes. And he's not the only person we could see wrestling on the main roster eventually, because given how much he's improved in recent years, we could see the same thing happening for our next subject too, Dante Chen. That's right, Dante Chen has recently been making something of a name for himself on NXT, as he has grown a bit of a cult following amongst fans. No, he's not at champion level yet or anything, but these things happen with time, and at 28 years old, Chen has all the time in the world. Need any evidence of how far he's come in such a relatively short space of time? Well, how about the fact that he's gone from losing to Duke Hudson in 2022 all the way to coming painfully close to beating Ethan Page for the NXT title in 2024. And that's not the only notable thing the Singapore native has been doing recently either, as on top of this, he's also been on main roster C shows like Main Event. That and taking excursions over to TNA to face off against opponents such as Zachary Wentz and Casey Navarro. So as you can see then, Shawn Michaels already has a lot of faith in Dante's skills and appears to have every intention of utilizing them to their fullest, which is exactly why we expect his star to rise further as the months and years go on. And who knows, we may even see title success in his future, with the first title he'll have a real chance of winning probably being the North American Championship. And after that, we could see him having a solid mid-card role for years to come, whether that be in the developmental brand or the main roster, because at the end of the day, when you're someone with the potential that he has, and when you're someone who's been able to improve your game as much as he has recently, then there's no way you shouldn't be on a path straight to success. But then the same thing could be said about everyone we've discussed today, as they've all come a long way over a relatively short space of time. So if you're looking for the future of WWE, look no further than these performers, as at the rate they're going, they'll be taking over in no time.